Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cocktails and Rocktails with me, your most notorious groupie, Allison Rouse, author of this little book right here. These other little books, gonna add another one to these three very soon. Gonna have a little poll talk. And where you can get all that, my funny ass merchandise, down in that description. So go down, fiddle about, check it out. And thank you to everybody for just really being an awesome family, for all the support you bring to this channel, for all the conversations, all the love, I love the vibe here. You guys, I couldn't do this without you. So I'm always just so thankful for everything you do here. It really, truly just warms my heart every time. So thank you so much, and know how much I really, truly love everybody here, and I still suck at answering emails. I do. I'm just not on social media, and I don't keep any of my notifications on, except for text messages, so I'm really bad at that. I know. I'm sorry. I'm going to try and get better, I promise. And today, speaking of getting better, we're going to be talking about a little book that is actually a bestseller at the time. Band that was just in town that... this picture right here. It's a happy place. But one of my favorite bands, a lot of people don't know, is Snow Patrol. I really love the band because their lead singer, obviously, Gary Lightbody. Just, to me, he's one of the most poetic musician lead singers that I've ever met. Like, he is just so not Shakespearean, like even older than that, just he's like a bard, and to me he's one of the most talented lead singers. I love his band. I love his side band Tired Pony. If you haven't heard that, he's made 2 albums with Peter Buck with REM, Jack Knife Lee, who's a great producer, guitar player, just really amazing. And as a human being, from what I've seen, from what I've experienced, just truly vulnerable, truly open to who he is, or not afraid to be vulnerable. Like, he's like such a kind heart and soul. He's just one of these people that's just happy for his friends, and then they mean everything to him. And if they have a great accomplishment, it's his great accomplishment. He's so happy for them. He's not someone that gets jealous or angry or anything. But anyway, so he has a new book out, Forest Through the Path, same as their new album. They're on tour right now. They just came through. Anyway, so, and I kind of want to talk about his book because, I mean, especially if you're our age, as you're getting older and we start to lose our parents, because he lost his father to dementia, like the same year I lost my mother to Alzheimer's. And he talks about a lot of different things in this book. But anyway, all right, so I'm babbling too much before we get into our drinks. We're going to finish off this little puppy right here. And I think it's very appropriate because Violet Fire, it sounds like a song he would write, or, a lyric he would have. And he's sober, so he wouldn't be drinking this, but we are. And this is by Uinta. You might be able to find it on your shelves because Uinta definitely is nationwide. So if you find it, you guys check it out. We're going to give it another go today. I've already had a couple drinks, but I'm not going to tell you again because, yeah. So everybody, get Violet, kick up your feet, and let's have a little cocktails and Gary Tales. All right, everybody, refresher. Cheers, big ears. Just really good. They call it the new style heavy lager, so it's got that body of an IPA without the bitterness. It's fresh and crisp and juicy, just like a Corona, or, a nice, just regular crispy lager beer. Just, not basic by any means. Just really good. Absolutely delicious. Really love this. Uinta's doing they kind of got basic there for a while, not going to lie, but they've got a few things that they came out with that I'm like, who's your new brewmaster? Because, well done. Well done, Uinta. You're not boring anymore. Although you do have some great base flavors. You really do. That really keep your company moving. But okay, so let's talk about this book, Forest Through the Path. I mean, it's just like I said for me, because, and I think with Gen X, as we're getting older, you know, we're losing our parents, and we're going through all these rite of passages that we've never experienced before. We think we experience all these learning curves in, the teens, the 20s, and the 30s, 40s, 50s, and on. We're just supposed to be some in the 30s, but the 40s we're starting to not learn. But I think it's just with Gen X, we're figuring out the rite of passage of losing our parents and becoming the elder, wiser generation, you know, at the top of the totem pole, so to speak. And one of those things, like I said, he talks about is losing his father to dementia. Like, he talks about how numb he was and that he couldn't cry for a year. He was, and one of the things that resonated with me, if you've, was he said something about looking at his father and not seeing his father like it was just this empty skin and bones. And that was one of the first things that he talks about in the book, and it just left me breathless because I'm like, oh God, I thought I was the only one that saw that. I was there when my mother took her last breath. Her soul left her body. Her vitals fell. Her blue eyes were the brightest blue and open and more aware than they had been in years. You know, and but her heart and lungs started shocking each other and just kept her body going soulless for a couple days. And at some point in the middle of the night, because I was doing the sleepover shift with my mom, I remember looking at her and thinking, it was just weird the way the skin hung off the bones. It was something totally different. And it really makes me believe in souls. I don't know how I believe in religion because I've studied so many of them, and I see the beauty in it, a lot of them, but I see the hypocrisies in them as well. And it just made me think, yeah, there really is something more to our bodies than just the skin, you know. And I always believed that, but it just made me see it in a different light. And, he talks about that, and I thought, God, thank you for talking about that, because I think there's a lot of us who lost our parents, especially if we've lost them to Alzheimer's or to something cancer where they were not responsive or not cohesive in their last days. Thank you for letting us understand that, because like I said, you think you're so young, and we have things in music that we understand, that we connect with, and as we get older, I think we feel a little more separated. So he kind of really brings that together. I'm sure just not for me, but for so many people who have been through this, and what it's like going through the motions, like going down and having to get the death certificate, and the numbness you feel, and then you start beating yourself up. And he talks about this in different parts of the book, because he doesn't just talk about his father, but this is kind of what he starts off with. He talks about things about his childhood. He talks about things, as in his music career, or how he writes and stuff. But this is just kind of what he starts off with. So, I think we can identify, because he talks about everything I think we all go through when we lose a parent. Do were we ugh, I could have been a better child. I could have done this different. I could have been so much better to them. We kind of shut out the good times, the Christmas mornings of laughter, and different little things, and we beat ourselves up about being a horrible child to them, and what can I do different, that I would take this back, or I would do this different. And I just really think it's fascinating that we all now at this age, he gives us something different to identify with that we lost in the past 15, 20 years, you know? So I really, really like that he does that he's vulnerable with how he is honest. And because this book is not your typical rock and roll biography, sex, drugs, rock and roll. I stood in the mirror as a child, swinging my arm like Pete Townsend, picturing my groupies. Not at all in this book. He's just very vulnerable about, his father dying and how it took him back to different things in his childhood, different vacations, different things he saw. And he's like, having arguments over politics with my dad, and how not worthless, but how what's the word I'm looking for? Minimal. It really, not minimal, but how unimportant it really was in the long run. But just, I mean, I really think it's amazing that he gives this generation at our age something to kind of think about and identify with as far as losing his parent. And I appreciate that he actually really does share that with us. And I appreciate that he does share his journey, because a lot of people look at, Gary Lightbody from Snow Patrol, his Johnny, his bandmate, his keyboard player, guitar player, or bass player, anyway, is engaged to Courtney Cox, or was. I don't know if they're still together. I think so. But I don't pay attention to anybody in the band but Gaz. But anyway, so, he kind of takes us on the journey of writing, and how certain things that he wouldn't go in the studio without things. He felt like he had to write things to go into the studio. He felt like he had to kind of be prepared and be, the Celtic bard that leads the rest of the band on this musical journey, on this creative journey to make a whole album. Like, I think he felt that. But then Johnny had told him, and he talks about this in the book, and musicians, you'll identify with your writing habits, because every musician has their own writing habits. But he talks about how Johnny's like, you know what? He's like, don't do that. Come in the studio with nothing and write on the fly, on the spot. And he talks about kind of going on a journey and how he loses himself while he's holding the guitar, and kind of thinks of like an argument with his dad that inspired the song, or an argument with his ex-girlfriend when he knew things were over, and how he could have done better. Because I think as we get older, we just beat ourselves up over things in the past that we can't change, rather than looking towards the future. But, and to me, it's really kind of fascinating, because I like to see, as groupies, I think, a lot of fans, they enjoy the culmination. You're out there, you're just watching the music you really like, and you want to divulge in the song and see what it was written about, and see what they were going through at that time. But I think it really gets lost to the majority of fans. They just get lost in the music that's already made and that's being presented to them. And as groupies, I always talk about being in the eye of the storm, and writing music and how they approach the music is really fascinating to me. And, because I was in the studio with Alice in Chains in 95, and I listened to that album, and I watched them make changes. And, when it's happening, I knew it was a phenomenal thing that I was watching, but looking back on it, I appreciated a hell of a lot more than when I was there. And, I think that's really kind of the theme of the book, not with Gary's dad, but with his band and his writing, because for a lot of years, Snow Patrol did not have an album for like 10 years, like 7, really. And, this is when Gaz was abusing cocaine, because a lot of people think he's like, just, they see Snow Patrol and they're just such a pure band. They don't party with groupies. Anyway, but and they don't do the same things that those those naughty little rock and roll boys would do, in the 80s, the sex, drugs, rock and roll. Bands like Snow Patrol, Coldplay, they don't live that. Oh no, they're too pure. If you're a band on the road, you've lived it a little bit, at least. You experience it, yeah. And, he was addicted to cocaine and beating himself up over cheating with a girlfriend. So he said, but I don't think that was just the bottom of it, because he said he was writing shit music, nothing, for 7 years, and he was just beating himself up over drinking more, and he became a mess doing more cocaine to, so he could drink more, that extra bump, and have a few more drinks. And he was just becoming a mess. But I think, one of the things that he was beating himself up on that I don't think he said out loud was, that he was making beautiful music during those 7 years. Absolutely stunning music. Under Tired Pony. Like I said, he's more poetic. He's more thoughtful, more soulful, more just vulnerable in his music than, rock and roll or country or just different fun music isn't going to be. But I think one of the things that, like I said, he hasn't said out loud is that it wasn't just the girl he was beating himself up for cheating on. He was currently cheating on his band with Snow Patrol with his side band, Tired Pony, and making absolutely stunning, beautiful music. Minnie Driver was even doing backup. It was Peter Buck, Jackknife Lee, Gaz, just really great. And they were just playing music and just in the studio of Jackknife and I think Topanga, but just kind of really raw emotion music. And it was beautiful, like Deepest End of the Ocean, absolutely love it. Silver Necklace, brilliant song, absolutely love it. But I think he was kind of beating himself more and going into the drug and alcohol spiral because he was cheating on his band and he loved his side mistress, Tired Pony, so much he made 2 babies, 2 albums, not 1, but 2. And he's the type of guy that will beat himself up over that, because when you think of Snow Patrol, do you even know anybody else's names? Most people don't. I mean, they have a very dedicated core fan base, which is absolutely lovely and amazing, and they really love the guys. But on the average person, do they know what every one of those band members brings into the band, not just musically, but emotionally, and, what they're dedicated to that band, and, but most lead singers to us, and Gaz is one of those that really, he is Snow Patrol to most of the world. So I think he felt a responsibility and he felt so guilty for cheating on Snow Patrol and couldn't write for them, but he could perform for the side band for his little Tired Pony mistress, And I think that was part of it. And he doesn't talk about it in the book, but I think he's kind of come to terms with that and he's really found his feet back in Snow Patrol again. I think he found his love in it again because one of the things he talks about in the book is, and this happened with my mom, music is really a huge part of someone with Alzheimer's or dementia's life because it soothes them. It kind of brings them back. It makes them kind of lost, get away from them being lost in this prison of Alzheimer's dementia, And every time the guy would come with his guitar to his father's care home, he would request Snow Patrol, Chasing Cars. Because he was so proud of his son. Even though he kept telling his son, he would talk about, his dad was not always very supportive of his career in the early days, saying, well, you better get a job because this isn't going to pan out, Because it was like 10 years took Snow Patrol to become big. A lot of people don't realize that. And if you think you haven't heard Snow Patrol, if you watched Grey's Anatomy, the early ones with choose me, that whole era, that's all Snow Patrol music. So, they kind of really got a huge boost by Grey's Anatomy. But I love the way he opens himself up to different things and, different suggestions. Like he's not your typical lead singer ego. Yeah, of course, all lead singers have an ego. They kind of have to be out there. But with Gary, I think I find that he listens to his producers. He listens to his other bandmates. He has a whole love and respect for them that a lot of lead singers just don't. Like you watch Robert Plant and Jimmy Page. They're constantly kind of vying for the attention, that great guitar god and the golden god lead singer. No, that's not Gary. He gives so much love and appreciation to not just his only band, but he's good friends with like Ed Sheeran and, different other bands that he just really supports and believes in and pushes. And he would rather talk about them than he would talk about himself. So not your typical lead singer ego. And this book really, really does actually portray that. And it portrays the struggle he had thinking about the ego he was in his younger days of Snow Patrol and cheating on the girl and living a little bit of rock and roll lifestyle out on the road. It's okay. It's okay. And it's okay to admit that you were cheating on Snow Patrol with Tired Pony. It's okay. And I think he finds that in this book. He didn't, plan on, like, writing the book, I don't think. And, of course, the new album is The Forest Through the Path. Both covers are Gary's own artwork because he's become a painter as well. He's really just like I said, when I think of him as an artist, it's not just the lead singer, it's not just a songwriter, it's not just, it's more of a poet, a bard, a man of all trades, type of thing, where he just really expresses everything he needs to in a very incredibly artistic and talented way. So, but like I said, this book's not going to be for everybody. I think it's kind of more of the struggles he went through that I think we appreciate as we're older, and I think if you're younger, and I listened to the book while I was cleaning house, and I am going to be getting to the Marianne Faithfull one because I've got two audiobooks that I'm going to listen with her, and because I really want to make it more about Marianne Faithfull, not about Marianne Faithfull and Mick Jagger. But that's besides the point of this book. And another thing I really liked about Gary's journey and how he shares it with us is his moving away from the cocaine. How he spoke to people, his peers around him, and, the people he really values, because he really does. And we don't see that a lot in the egos of, we don't even see that with the egos of Metallica right now, because James Hetfield went from, somebody that worked for him for 20 some odd years, called just, hey, James, no, you call me boss now. No, that would never be Gary. And I think, he's very, very kind of vulnerably honest about his move from cocaine and, what he saw in himself and how people around him were looking at him. And it's really not a sobriety of the ego. I just really, really love how he actually delved into each part of his life that he struggled with, that he went through pains and sadness and mourning with, and really kind of showed the vulnerable journey with his writing, with his band, when he was going off to university in Bangor or in Scotland because he wanted to get so far away. He lived in Northern Ireland during the struggles between the IRA and, all that. And he had an aunt that he really learned from that was welcoming to everybody. And I think she really reflects through him, I think. That's just my opinion. But, he talks about when he was running away and they were starting this band and, how he needed to get away from his family and, how we look back on it now and it's like, would we have done this? Yeah, we would have done the same thing, but we wouldn't have done it with such defiance and with such, youthful ego as we do. But I think that's normal. I think we all go through that rebellion that we just need to get the hell out of our house, away from our parents, and be free of all the rules, So I don't think we should beat ourselves up about it. And I'm glad that at some point, Gary finds himself and his peace with it. And that's how the book kind of ends, with a total peace in his own being. And I think that's a very inspirational thing for people our age, especially because, we can find a lot of peace in ourselves as we're young. We find a lot of esoteric surface peace in ourselves, But as we get to a certain age, it's like peace is something very, very different. Because you have very, very different things to make peace with, or to understand about yourself, or to appreciate and embrace for yourself. And he really kind of gives all that in this book. I mean, I know not everybody is going to see it the way I see it and everything, but I just think he was very much honest. I don't think he had a ghostwriter, as far as I know. I just like that he was true to his voice, like I was with mine. I walked away from, the big publishing house and the big agent, the big deal, to stay true to my voice. And I like that he's true to his. So, I mean, it just, a lot of things kind of resonated to me as an adult at this age, of things that we're going through and how we look at our past and how we beat ourselves up, and then how, our egos beating ourselves up over our past, what we did with our parents or friends or whatever. I think it finally comes to a head where they're just like we handled fights back in the 80s. I'm done throwing punches. You want to go get a beer? All right, let's go get a beer. And we just come to a certain piece in ourselves, you know. Probably a horrible analogy. But I think he really opens the door to people of our age kind of forgiving ourselves, and that's part of why we're taking the helm as the new, old, wiser generations. We're the next generation to go. And there's a whole responsibility in that. Gen X never wanted that damn responsibility. That's why we were 30 years old at 6 years old and 30 years old at 100 years old. We just wanted to stay right there in the middle. Not the problems of the youth, not the responsibility of the older generation, but here we are. And I think he shows that responsibility beautiful. I think he really opens himself up very well. I think, he's kind of really tied everything that he was going through, not only in the book, but also in a good new album, because I'll be honest, the last album they didn't like. They barely even did a tour. That album was not the best. Because I think you can see that it was still very contrived, and all this that he's going through now is not. So if you like it, let me know. Go check it out. You don't have to go check it out, but if you're older, you've lost parents, you're struggling with things that you went through, our experiences may be different, but the journey is the same. I think we just go through different vehicles or take different views or whatever, but it really is kind of the same journey as we get older. So he articulates it beautifully, in my opinion. But there we go. Tell me what you guys think. Tell me about a rock biography that you found that was more touching to you than the average, surface, this is what's going to sell rock and roll biography. Tell me about that down in the description or in the comments. If you guys go and read the book or listen to the book, go tell me what you think about it down in the comments. If you like Snow Patrol, tell me what you think about the new album. It's always going to be that one. But anyway, all right. And thank you to everybody for tuning in, as always, for really just making me feel like I have something worth saying. I mean, I think that's so important to everybody, that we all, feel that way. And I just cannot ever tell you guys truly how much, from the bottom of my heart, you just make me feel like $1,000,000. So you make me feel so comfortable with myself, which is way more priceless. You make me feel like we all have a safe space here. And I can never convey how appreciative of that I always am. So thank you. And thank you for getting to the end of the episode and listening to me babble about a man that everybody here knows. I adore him. So anyway, I'll leave it with that. I'll leave it with a little violet fire. That's what I'm feeling on the inside. Yeah. But thanks again for everybody to get to the end of the video. If you're just lurking, go down, hit the subscribe, hit the share. Let's get us to 10,000. That's our next goal. We're almost there. I love that I hit over 2,300. I'm just so happy that just 2,000 people want to tune in. So thank you so, so much, you guys. Really. Hit the subscribe. Hit the share, hit my bells, and we'll see you next time on Cocktails Rocktails. Cheers, big ears.